We are live. Tilton Public Library with Byron Hacker. Take it away, Brian. Byron.
Okay.
Sorry.
Tonight, I guess we're supposed to talk about raised bed gardening. And before we went live, I was being inundated with questions, or be prepared that I'm going to get attacked tonight with questions. So, you know, those of you who've been here before, you know, I kind of do things really open-ended. You know, you haven't been here, so just jump in and ask questions. I don't want to stand and sit here and talk all night. I don't have show and tell tonight like we did last time. So and I thought, well, how could I bring a raised bed garden in here? Glennie wouldn't want me hauling in, you know, 2x6s and a saw and you know, drills and everything, and we're going to have hands-on building a raised bed for all of you. When you talk about raised beds, it's not just talking about a big raised bed, but also container gardens are considered in raised beds also now. A lot of the experts are kind of talking about different things like that, and with apartments, and we're having more and more of the younger generation living in apartments, and how can they garden? It was interesting, the ophthalmologist that I see, he and his wife live up around Appleton, and on 114 Highway 10, that big, huge apartment complex. I said, Doc, how do you garden? They're both from India, so they do a lot of Indian cooking and everything. And he said, oh, we just go and buy those big, huge plastic swimming pools for kids, and that's what we garden in. And I said, do you have good luck with that? Well, yeah, our place, we got it right down where the water is. And he said, we need water, we just go fish it out and water our plants with it, and everything. So raised bed gardening, you can be as creative as you want with doing that. The ones that I'm most familiar with are the ones that we built up at the hospital, the community garden at the hospital. And we have, I think there's 32 of them up there. And if you need a garden space, they rent them. $15 for one bed and $25 for two beds. So, but generally what we did when we built those, we used treated lumber. And a lot of people say, well, is it safe to use that treated lumber? And all the research that I've looked at, most of it is very, very safe. If you take railroad ties that are treated with creosote, that's where you run into the problem. The pressure treated green lumber, you shouldn't have a problem with that. But when people use those old railroad ties, they go shopping along the railroad when they, you know, change ties and everything, and it's, excuse me, those aren't the good ones to use. Generally, what we did, we used 2x6s, and we used, I think they were, 2x6 or 2x8s. We have two raised beds up there that are 8 inches tall. And Master Gardeners did an experiment several years ago with sweet potatoes in there and growing sweet potatoes. And believe it or not, they did extremely well. The only problem was our friends, the mice and the chipmunks and all of them love getting in there. And somebody said, well, you better be on top of that because they'll go burrow down in there and they'll eat all your sweet potatoes. They'll have them completely devoured and it'll come to harvest and you'll pull them up and they'll be hollow because they were in there feeding and eating. Well, we found that, so we had to deal with that. But you could also use expensive cedar if you want. I always say cedar's way, way, way too expensive. You can, your treated lumber 2x6s, if they last you 8 years and you got to change it, do it. You know, the cedar, sure, you're probably going to pay, 3-4 times of what it would cost you to do the regular treated lumber. What we did also, we made, they were 4 feet wide and they were 8 to 12 feet long. And so, if you want to get a 12-footer, 10-footer, 8-footer, it's entirely up. The beds up there are all 4 by 8 feet long and wide. And we found that it worked very, very well with planting almost anything that you want to plant in that raised bed. Like I said, we did sweet potatoes in the deeper bed. We used carrots one year and they didn't do near as well as what the sweet potatoes did, but carrots can be fussy. All of you that have gardens, know very well, sometimes carrots can be a real challenge to all of that. Potatoes, we did potatoes in one bed and it worked really well. We used a lot of mulch on top or around the potatoes. And I just attended a class the other night and they were talking about different mulches and things like that. And mulching instead of hilling potatoes. I remember as a kid, my mother would make us go and hill potatoes, and somebody else is, they're all shaking their heads. Yeah, they all remember that. And they've started not doing a lot of hilling, but they've been building the grass clippings, compost, and things like that around the plant instead of hilling up the ground around the plant, where it's providing, just like straw bale gardening. That was a big craze, several years ago. And we found that the mulching and straw, works just as well, around your potatoes. If you're going to use grass clippings, make sure that you don't go to the city compost pile and get loads of grass clippings, because you don't know which grass clippings have been sprayed with chemicals or whose lawn, because a lot of lawn services spray, they clip, and they haul all the clippings up there. If you're going to do that, or you see somebody, ask them if their lawn's been sprayed with any kind of chemical, because a lot of times that chemical that's on the grass clippings can affect your plants as well. So, be aware of that and be careful with that.
So would kill it? Kill the.
It could, yes, sure. There was one professor was talking the other night that people, just like some people with medication, well, if I'm a bigger person, the doctor said take 10 milligrams. Well, I'm a bigger person, I'll take 20 milligrams instead. It's the same thing with chemicals that you use. That's why they put directions on the label. Follow the instructions, and not get carried away and think, well, I'll use that much more. Because this professor was saying a lot of times people then eat the produce and they're starting to find that it affects their physical well-being, or it starts affecting their organs and what's going on internally within their bodies. So always, something more all the time. So that's what with raised bed gardening. Then what type of soil to put in there? What we did up at the hospital was we got some better ground hauled in, and that's what we filled the beds with. And we also put compost in, and we used some soil that we got in that had composted cow manure in it. And now they're kind of talking too with doing a raised bed to put hay on the bottom, and then put the next layer is soil, and then to plant instead of, filling it all with soil, there's better aeration and water drainage. One thing with a raised bed garden, you've got to always replenish your soil because it will, go down. We noticed that up in the hospital, we got to do a reload of a lot of the beds again because it rains and it, leaches out and deteriorates. So
Byron, does all of what you're saying apply to if you have, what is ours called? Ours is like waist high.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
versus
same
on the
thing.
ground.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I'm talking the ones on the ground, but
Yeah.
when you have with
About
this
that way.
table,
Yeah.
same thing,
Yeah.
same thing.
So how full do you have to fill those?
Well, it depends what you're gonna plant in it. If you're gonna have radishes or lettuce, they don't require much soil. However, if you're going to have things with longer roots, carrots, heavier item things like green beans, people think, well, green beans, and when you pull them out in fall, you got a pretty good root system on them. Same thing with broccoli, cauliflower, you gotta have a good depth of. So it all depends what you are gonna plant in it.
Well, we fill ours pretty much full, so
Sure.
that we can just reach in and
Yep.
garden.
So what do you plant in it?
I've done green beans, I've done some kohlrabi. 1 year I did a tomato, but they get sort of
Yeah,
top
yeah.
heavy and
Yes.
hard to control. What else did I don't have much luck with radishes for some reason.
You gotta plant them early. I got mine started in a little container, sitting
Okay,
outside already.
Mm.
Was just kind of putzing with them to see and
sure.
to see how they would do, because now there's a new, what is it called? Succession plantings, where
Oh.
they're planting the whole year, where you use the plastic milk jugs. And, this one lady she's from Minnesota. And she's been doing this, and she plants stuff there all year long. And it's all under the milk jugs. And people had asked, well, do you have to provide heat? And she said, no. With the sun, she said she doesn't take the cover off, the cap off. she leaves that on, and then so it's like a mini greenhouse in wintertime, and it retains the heat, just like wall of waters with tomatoes. You know, years ago, they were a big thing. You would see the tomato cages, and they had plastic around them filled with water. And same principle, kind of, same principle. So what did the best in your?
I also had peppers in there. The green beans were good. Kohlrabi were good. But lettuce, not so good. And I don't know why either. I planted, what is it called? The kind that come more to a head.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I have never, I don't know if any of the rest of you have ever had luck. I've never had luck with head lettuce.
Yeah.
You know, leaf lettuce, you know, that'll grow,
Yeah.
you know, like a weed. I've never had luck with growing head lettuce. So, peppers should do well because they don't have a big, you know, root base to them. Tomatoes, we planted them up in the raised beds up at the hospital, but compared to, because they get tall and then they flop over.
Actually, mine do. I have a little garden on the side of my garage, and they do better there. I've had beautiful luck when they're in the regular ground.
Yes, yep. So, yeah, they were, this professor that was on the other night was also talking about tomato cages. And he said, don't waste your money buying those 3-prong ones because they don't hold up. You got to get the 4-prong, you know, and they hold up much, much better, but they're hard to find. And when I was a kid, you know, there were no such things as tomato cages.
Yeah.
My mother would go and we would find lats and pound them in 4. And then, well, she used years ago, the women all wore nylons. And I remember, you know, wrapping the nylons around, and perfect because it's got enough elasticity to it, and where the tomatoes, you know, didn't tip it over. So
You should maybe get those cages at Stein's, because I got some there a couple of years ago, the square
the
cages.
4-1,
But I don't know, maybe they, you know, that was a couple of years ago.
yeah. And well, if, you know, what isn't expensive? Yeah, seeds, if, you know, we talked about this, if you haven't gotten seeds, you know, go look, because prices are very, very expensive compared to what they were a year ago, you know, just, you know. I didn't buy any peppers seeds this year. I used my old ones from last year, and I had a very good germination rate. I just got done transplanting them all. Transplanted the last flat this morning, and you know, they're doing, you know, fairly well.
So it is okay to use leftovers from the previous year.
Yes. There's I don't know if I brought that along. Yeah, some seeds keep, you know, for 3 to 5 years without a problem, yes. But others, the problem I've had the most is with onions. I always get new onion seeds when I planted onions from seed, which, you know, I don't anymore. It's cheaper to just go buy, you know, the onion plants. I don't like sets. That's just my bias. But yeah, onion seeds didn't keep well, But like, beans and all of those, they keep quite some time. Yeah, don't throw, and you know how to tell if they're good enough? Mary, you know how to do that?
No,
Okay, you take a piece of paper toweling,
yeah,
you wet it. Put a couple of the seeds on there, cover it back with another wet and keep it warm. And you'll know real quickly once they start germinating. Broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, all the cabbage family, 2 days they should be germinating for you. Same thing with green beans, and it's a very easy way of testing. If you haven't done it, just do it for sake of trying the funness of doing it. So you done that?
Yeah.
And other suggestions?
Well, I've got a new setup right here that a friend sent to me for their container
Sure.
right there. So I'm gonna go with above ground gardening this year,
Yeah.
more traditional. Talked to someone recently about straw bale
Oh, yeah.
gardening. I'd never heard of it. And it's fascinating to look into it, but there's some downside to it as well. It seems like a lot of maintenance.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And usually the bales will last 2 years. And that's about the extent of it. And the monks at the monastery in St. Nazianz did a lot of planting one year with his tomatoes that way and had very good luck. But the big thing is you got to prep your bales. And you got to get them watered, and you got to have them, loaded with, because there's no nutrients in old bales, so yeah, you got to, contend to deal with that.
Mike, Mike Buckberger does those.
Yes, right. Yeah, and he's had lots
he
of
has.
luck with that.
Mhm.
Oh,
But the problem is getting to be, where do you find bales now? Because everybody's doing the big, everybody's smiling. You can't find little bales anymore, very, and if you can, you're gonna pay good for them, because they found that's a very good market. So I never asked Mike where he gets his, but
He used to get it from the ruins, but now they don't do it anymore. And I
Yep,
don't
yep.
know where it is.
yeah, I can't remember what he had said, so. But it's all, it's like any type of gardening. You gotta kind of play around with it, and just like nowadays they're talking no-till gardening, like all the farmers plant everything's basically no-till now. Well, now the garden craze is caught on to no-tilling your garden. Just go out and plant it, rotate your crops from what you had last year. They're all pulling out their phones and looking at that. So yeah, that's but same thing with containers. I have found that tomatoes and peppers do very well in big containers, but they're a lot of work because you got to water sometimes twice a day because they dry out very quickly. And you got to take into consideration too how much soil nutrients are in the containers. As a lot of people use this, soilless mix where there's no actual soil in it. And it's like compost and vermiculite and peat moss and things. Well, there's very little, if any, nutrients in that. So you gotta have a nutritional program for your plants. So, be it whatever it is, you have to deal with that. Then people usually ask, well, if you're using regular fertilizer, what kind do you use? And I always say, if you don't want to get real technical, just use, 10-10-10. It's a all general purpose, 20-20-20. If you're doing flowers, you want the middle number higher because that promotes blossoming. Where the first number, nitrogen, don't get carried away. That's why a lot of people say, well, I got, this fertilizer and the first number was real high. And I said, well, yeah, your tomatoes are going to be all just green foliage because it's all nitrogen, just like what do you dump on your lawns or lawn services? They spray with high nitrogen, gives your lawn a nice green color. And, we have gotten to be a society where, we want our lawns to look good, Mine goes brown, I don't care, then I don't have to cut it. So
what's the middle number?
What?
So you got nitrogen, what's the middle number in the last?
Nitrogen, potassium's.
Is it a phosphorus?
Yes.
I don't know which one it's for.
I got it written down here. Nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium.
Okay.
And phosphorus it plays a big role in fruit and blossom production. So when we had our greenhouse, Judy would always go, when you wanted to see blossoms starting to set, we switched from 10-10-10 fertilizer to probably a 5-30-10 fertilizer mix, because that middle number promotes, flower blossoming. And, a lot of big box greenhouses, we talked about this once, I think the very first class, they spray a lot of their plants with growth retardant, which stimulates the blossom to shoot up. Because we want to go to the store and we want to buy the flower that's already in bloom. We want an instantaneous.
I don't.
No, I know, you
If
know.
there's one, then I know what color's in that flat.
Yes. When we had our greenhouse, we didn't use growth retardant. People would come and say, none of your flowers have blossoms on them. Well, we purposely, I even encourage people that when you get them and you plant them and they're full of blossom, pluck them off, because you want your plant to get established. You don't want to see that beautiful growth, because how long is your plant going to last? It's putting the energy into that bloom, not into the plant root development, which you want. So, and we always use water soluble fertilizer. You get it, mix it in a 5-gallon pail of water and go out, and that's the easiest in my book, because then you don't have to worry about plants getting burnt or over fertilizing. A lot of times we made a very weak solution of the fertilizer and watered that way every time we watered. And it was a very, very, very weak, solution of it. But then it was, because we used all soilless mix, and when you water and it leaches through, and I always say, don't waste your money buying the soilless mix that has fertilizer added to it, because you will plant it, you will use it, and you water, it leaches out and it's gone. So don't waste your money, doing that. So,
And get a rain barrel. The rain water
yes,
is
there
always
you
the
go.
best.
Get a rain barrel.
We have one of those big totes, those big square ones.
Yep. Yeah, you find them all over.
Mhm.
They're selling them. We have, I think, 2 or 3 of them up at the community garden at the hospital. So,
So you're saying don't buy soil that already has the fertilizer in it? Okay.
yeah, you're wasting your money, Mary, because I know how Jerry waters,
Yeah, I know.
Even worse.
I don't wanna touch it.
Yeah. No, because, okay, if the fertilizer's in there, you water, what happens?
It's gonna run through.
It's gonna run through and it washes your fertilizer out. You might get 1 or 2 times, but then after that, it's gone.
So that's what makes it run through?
Well,
Because there's
when you water and the fertilizer that's in there, it's just like taking a shower. You have soap on you and you stand under the water and it rinses it off. In essence, same principle.
Okay,
The fertilizer that's in there. I know the box stores, they don't like when I say that because that's usually an item that's a lot more expensive than regular soil. And what I have found, if you want to use some of that, add soil to it. Usually what I would do, I would get the soilless mix, a bale of that. And I would get like a wheelbarrow or something. Then I would go and buy one of the cheap bags of potting soil and mix some of that in with it because it will, give it a little more substantial weight and holding together of the soil. Because that peat moss dries out, a hanging basket. Think of how many hanging baskets and they dry out and what happens? You go water,
it goes right
it runs right straight through. She's going, yeah, you know what you do? If you get that, take the inside and put a plastic in the inside of it. Poke a few holes in it. It's going to keep all your moisture in there. Just like those cocoa liners.
Mhm.
Okay, take the liner out of the basket, put plastic underneath, put the liner and everything back in. You're not gonna have all this problem with watering and everything drying out on you. Or if you plant your own, put that plastic in right before you put your soil in there.
So when I buy one, how am I gonna get that out to put the?
That's why you got him around.
Yeah. I mean, it's got the hanger, you gotta unfold
Well, you
it.
gotta undo the hanger
Then what?
and then take the liner out.
What the-
If it's a
It should-
plastic
it should just
container,
lift
a
out.
hanger, what,
Should
Sean?
just lift out when you take the
Sure.
handle out.
Is there always a liner? I
Well,
thought-
you have a plastic one probably, right?
Yeah,
There's no liner in there,
that's what I'm talking
okay?
about,
And sometimes they have a little saucer underneath and that'll hold the water
Yep.
from coming out. Once it gets root bound, you could lift the whole thing out and then put a little plastic underneath.
Okay.
You can try it. You gotta putz around with. Just like I said before, gardening's, it's like a big experiment. You gotta putz around, you gotta do this, you gotta try this, that didn't work, Just like I said, when the first class, when I started doing this and I, had worked mainly juvenile court, Jerry's very familiar. Well, the kids, I couldn't take and throw them out, You have a plant and it doesn't look good. What do? You take it out and you throw it in the garbage if it doesn't look good. Well, dealing with humans, you can't do that with a plant. If it doesn't look right or whatever, you don't like it, get rid of it. You know, just like they talk about a weed. What is a weed? A plant that's growing in the wrong place, which could be a petunia, it could be a geranium, it could be a cucumber, it could be anything. So if it's in the wrong place, it's a weed. Pull it out, get rid of it. So now you got a few more tricks to try. And don't call me, I won't come over.
Did you ever hear of a product called Soil Moist?
Soil moist.
It almost, you can mix it in your soil and it actually swells up like the inside of a diaper and it will hold the moisture.
Moisture.
Like in your plants, I have a big raised bed. And one year I put some in it because it dries out so fast.
Yes.
The birds dust bathe in it and wreck my grows. So I tried that one year. It actually swells up. It looks like gelatin or something.
Yeah. I know what you're talking
Yeah, soil
about
moist.
because when we had the flower shop, we would use that. I can't remember what Judy used it for, but we would put that sometimes in a vase
Okay.
for moisture, same thing.
It does. And when it starts drying out, it starts whipping out
Yeah,
of the
yeah,
soil.
yes, but it swells up. It can be a little bit and you spread it and it swells up, right?
Yeah, you don't have to use so much of it.
Yes,
It's
correct.
just
You don't have to use a
Oh,
lot.
yeah.
So,
As far as tomato cages, I ordered some a couple of years ago. I'll never have to order any the rest of my life. They are heavy duty. They even have things to push them down the ground.
Oh.
I special ordered them. I'm never gonna have to. I'm so sick of screwing around with them cheap ones and shoving them
Are
in.
they square?
No, they're round.
Because I
They
need
are-
oh, okay.
They're round. They're real heavy duty. They're dark green. And then I also ordered those greenhouse buckets I told you about last time. It's almost the size of a 5-gallon pail and it actually has a 4-hole vent on top. I think a company that has veterans make them. Greenhouse buckets are called. And I take 2 of the catalytic tubs. I have 2 of them and then, that's a lot higher. I'll never have to order any of them either the rest of my life. They're so
Now,
easy.
have you ever had problems? What do you do with your cages? Do you sterilize them?
No, they're just in the garden and I just pull them out of the frost. No,
See, a lot of times if you ever get tomato blight,
yeah,
if you don't sterilize your cages, you're gonna have it again the next year.
okay. I can easy done, they're coated. They're
Yeah,
like a rebar
yes.
almost.
Okay,
But I know I spent a little bit of money, but I'll never.
they're
have-
worth it.
Yeah, I'm never gonna have to order them again.
Yeah, because if they're made like almost with rebar, that's, you
You
gotta
even
fix-
have a little thing on there that you can use your foot to press
foot
it
to
down into
push
the
them right
ground.
in the ground.
And the lighter ones I use for like the flowers and stuff.
Sure, sure.
So where did you get those?
I ordered them, you'll just have to look them
Oh.
online, I don't remember where.
Tomato cages, heavy
Yeah,
duty.
heavy duty tomato cages. I mean, I'm so sick of dicking around.
How much were they?
Oh, I have no clue, I'd have to look it up,
Okay,
I don't remember at all.
I'm just curious as to, how expensive, they
I
were.
look, it's been a while.
There you got something to do now. While we talk about something else, you can look on those tomato cages.
Well, when you said sterilize them, I've never sterilized mine, so what should I do with them? How do you sterilize your cages? What do you put on it?
Bleach,
Alcohol or what?
bleach,
Bleach,
some bleach water and you just,
wipe them off or?
Wipe
spray it
them
on
off.
or- Okay, all right.
put
I've
your,
never had a problem, but I've never done it.
well, if you do, if you do, that's just like, last week or last time, Lisa was talking about Epsom salts. Well, did you see the latest craze now of what's being recommended? Take a Tums
Oh,
and put it in the hole.
I think I read that.
Don't do it. Don't do it. One of, I found Leonard's paper that he did on Epsom salts. And, is it good? And, the big thing is, you really don't need to use it. And it changes your soil composition for longer term use of Epsom salts. So, the magnesium is part of it that, drives the photosynthesis. And if you're lacking that, that's where the big problem comes in. So
What about eggshells in the hole for tomatoes?
why would you use that? Tell me why you
I
use
thought they
that.
said for calcium.
Well,
Yeah, that's what I
why did tomatoes need calcium?
Just that flowers?
For their bones. I don't know, Byron, you tell me.
Oh, well, okay. A lot of times that calcium prevents blossom end rot. You all know what that is. That's where the end gets rotted. Well, the tomato is having problems uptaking calcium. So the age-old thing is, well, put eggshells in the hole and they'll have calcium. Well, that's not going to help with the uptake. And if we don't have proper water, rain, and we have calcium in the soil, and so, the eggshells really aren't going to do a lot.
That's good, because one year I saved a whole bunch when I went out to plant and I totally forgot them.
Well, that's just like somebody at my house is in, I can't throw any coffee grounds out in.
That was my next question.
She goes and sprinkles it all over, so.
Does it help?
With what? I don't know.
Judy must
Someone might.
know.
It might,
I know
well,
that,
just
but I
like
don't know
anything.
what to do either.
Eggshells might help too, they might. Just like putting the Tums in the hole, well, that's calcium. And so that's the latest craze. I just got a little book, I was gonna bring it along and forgot it. From our friend, I shouldn't even say it, but Jerry Baker, who professes to be the world's best master gardener in the world. Well, he's on this craze of the Tums in the hole now. Another new little thing. But that's what happens with calcium.
Okay.
If we don't have enough rain and you don't water your garden, you're not going to have proper uptake of the calcium when the plant needs it to prevent, and that's basically what it is. Other good issues.
Jerry wants me to ask you about bags.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I love them. I buy them all the time, hang them up, and after a period of time, it seems.
By the July 4th, they're.
Stop. It's not that. But it's hard to keep them watered down below. I mean, it's easy to pour it on top, and all of a sudden I see the water running through. How do you water those? Without the little gizmo like Honeymoon Acres says.
Lay them down.
I've tried that.
Did that work better?
Well.
But it's a
it was
lot
probably
more
too late by
work.
then.
It's a lot more work.
Lay them down and water each little hole.
Mhm. And leave them lay, and then hang them back up. I've never been a lover of them. They are nice for impatiens and other viney plants, but I'm basically a lazy gardener. I don't like all that excess work. Lenny's sitting in the back shaking
Oh,
her
I
head
tried 'em 1 year
away.
and it's never again. I mean, they're beautiful and I.
Yes,
They had
yes.
some impulse
Yeah,
purchase,
when
I
you first
bought
get
them
'em.
and they were dead pretty quick.
Yeah, well, but see, it's all soilless mix again.
Yeah.
And if that ever dries out,
Yeah.
you're gonna have nothing but trouble,
Mhm.
just like a hanging basket. That's why I said, take the cocoa liner out, put a piece of plastic underneath.
Or
to
I wonder if you had like a tub, like a cement mixing
Yeah,
square thing
sure.
full of water and you just kind of like
Dip
leave it
it.
in there,
Leave it in
wet weeding,
Yes,
and then came back and hung it up.
you're having the tub baptism of your,
Yeah.
plastic, yeah, well, like I said, how many times today? You gotta kind of play around with this and experiment with it and, try something new. Put it in the bathtub with Jerry.
Oh, stop. Let's move on.
So much of gardening depends on the weather and rains that are the right time,
Yes.
timely rains.
And I'll still say, Mother Nature's rain is better than sitting and watering and watering and watering. Like I talked about how we were very at the Chilton City flower bed, the 1 year when it was all petunias. And then the person that did the watering, they went on vacation for 2 weeks while nobody else watered. Well, the plants were very accustomed. They didn't need a deep root system. So they were very used to getting water all the time. Well, you know what happened? They all went to seed because it was time to die. Well, you got to reproduce, we'll make seed. Well, that's what happened. And it was because the watering stopped. So. Other goodies.
So you suggest, if you're doing raised bed gardening with moles and gophers and things like that, put in like a wire screen underneath that to keep them from coming up that way, or are they gonna get into it that way?
Yep, we tried that when we did the sweet potatoes, and we were finding over the top, we watched, over the top, they went in their little hole.
Wow.
So I don't think, screening, sure, it might help, but a deeper bed, molds and voles, they'll go over the top and burrow in versus coming up from the bottom. Just like all winter when we would have a light snowfall, and to my bird feeder, you would see all those little tracks in the morning, that's. It won't, I don't think it'll, that it helped a lot. If you can easily try it, so. That's my son does maple syrup. And he's had nothing but problems with red squirrels this year out in the woods chewing holes in the plastic piping.
I heard woodpeckers were doing it too.
Yes, but the woodpeckers aren't with the plastic, they have trouble getting through it versus the squirrels. Yeah, he had nothing but trouble, First he thought it was the deer, but the deer do not gnaw like a red squirrel will. They'll just keep eating and eating and eating until they get a hole and the sap squirts out. And that's what they want, so.
How was the run this year? How was the maple run this year?
Well, he quit.
Uh-huh.
He just hauled, he hit last year's total of what they had, and he just, I think last night, he hauled, I can't remember, 1,100 gallons
Mhm.
again to get processed, so he did, a lot of people had pulled their taps, but he was in where it was woods,
Mhm.
and a lot of the ground is still frozen, but he had a vacuum pump, which sucked the sap out, and if you didn't have that this year, the trees didn't, cause look, we had that real warm spell, and the maples all started budding out. Well, then it came to a screeching halt again, and so then the sap in a regular tree just stopped running. And so I'm a little worried of what our leaf situation will be this year because of that.
No, my peaches are ready to flower.
Really?
You can tell that they're like apricots are the first ones that flower.
Yes.
Hopefully this will be it for the weather.
Yeah, because this weather will, do them in.
Yeah.
So
If you get a couple warm days, then it gets cold again, then it's
Yeah.
not happening.
the worst thing for fruit trees, for any kind of tree.
But they're always the first flowering ones.
Yeah.
That's the problem with them.
That's why they don't tend to always do well here, because of goofy springs, and we're finding our spring weather we go from winter to summer now. We have very little spring here anymore, from when we were all younger, except the one young one in the back there. But yeah, it's,
The frost is out now.
it depends where you go. Nathan said out in the woods, the frost is still down in the ground. So it's unbelievable. So, other questions? Mary, did you learn what you wanted to tonight? But go home and try something different that way. Just, putz around with it, and that's.
The manure that these big dairies are selling from their digesters, does that have any nutrients in it? I've been hearing rumors that it's not very nutrient.
The what?
The stuff left over from the big manure digesters.
There's,
I mean, is it like sterile soil because it's been treated or whatever?
it killed certain weeds. I don't even say, because we used it in the city flower bed.
Mhm.
And we've been fighting purslane for the last
Yeah, I got it.
umpteen
Eat it.
years because of it. It purslane doesn't, it's gotta be a much higher temperature,
Mhm.
just like, nothing against Chilton's compost or New Holstein's compost. It's not composted hot enough, and it's not killing some of the seeds.
Mhm.
And, it looks good, but then it's a lot of weeds that were not killed.
I mean, what's the nutrient value of it from a digester?
From the digester, it's more nitrogen than anything else.
Okay.
I know there were some experiments that were done with that, with lawns, where it was spread on lawns,
Okay.
and the lawns, no other chemicals were used, and the ones that were, the digested manure was on there, they greened up much, much more than even what,
So it'd be good for your grasses, like your corn and
yes.
onions.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
I wouldn't use that. I got plenty of compost where I live, so.
My sister and brother-in-law swear by it. They get a big load and they dump it on their garden all the time. And I said, well, you can have the purslane. I don't want it, you know. That's a horrible, horrible, horrible weed. If you ever get it,
I have
it's difficult.
it's one tiny little leaf that started
Yes.
to plant.
That's right. Like I said, what we're gonna try this year at the city flower bed, we're gonna put all wood chips down, and then we're gonna do a no-till planting and see if that helps. You know, because, you know, it can last in the soil 9 to 15 years to seeds. And once it goes to seed, it's almost like garlic mustard. Same thing, it gets very invasive and it's hard to control it.
Isn't velvet leaf 11 years?
Something like that.
I hate velvet leaf.
And that's another, you know, tricky one to try and get rid of, you know, get it when it blossoms before it goes to seed. So,
Did you say that was from the compost at the city?
yeah, and digested manure. Because you never know what, you know, you might be very good at what you take to the compost pile. She might haul anything and everything and dump it in there. So you know, it's Heinz 57. You never know what goes in there. And then if it's not cooked at a high enough temperature, certain weeds are never killed when it's composted. And so
Byron, if you're using a container to plant a tomato, do you buy the patio type tomatoes or
you can buy a regular,
you can?
sure. I've done indeterminate. Indeterminate are the ones that keep growing and growing and growing. If I wouldn't use one of the big beef steaks.
No.
Or things like that.
The big heirloom ones.
Yeah, yes, you could use, you know, a smaller, earlier variety
Okay,
where the plant doesn't get near as large.
okay.
But you're gonna have to stake it. And so I've had good luck doing them.
Okay.
I've had good luck planting peppers in a container too.
Would you just put a couple in a?
Yeah,
In one?
like peppers?
Yeah.
Yes. It depends how big of
Yeah.
a barrel you have. Just like this last year, I had some extra onion plants. And I planted them in a barrel and I've never could raise onions. Well, I did very successful at having red onions.
Oh,
And I'm gonna do that again this year. Because I never, some things you can grow, other things you can't. I never could grow onions, never. Oh, I had a very good crop of red ones, very proud of it. But you gotta water and but onions, again, they tend to do well if it gets a little dried out compared to a tomato, and onions, surface roots per se, where a tomato, it'll grow very deep. So if you do a container and you have a hole in the bottom for drainage, put a container under your container so it holds the water. So if you water and it runs out, at least it's in there and it's gonna, soak from the bottom up.
Yeah.
That's why now you are seeing a lot of house plants that have a wick in them, and they have them in a flat where there's water. So they don't need to run around and water plants all over. Look, next time you go to a big box store. I haven't seen them here, but I've seen them in Manitowoc, in, like Home Depot and Lowe's, and where the plants have 2 wicks in them.
What do you mean by a wick?
Uh,
A little,
cut your strings off of your thing.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
it's something just like this,
okay,
and it's in the top of the plant, and it goes through the pot and out the holes in the bottom. There's 2 of them generally.
I read once that you should take something almost like a straw, not a straw, but, and put, when I'm talking about these bag flowers, and they put something all the way down in there, and then when you water, it goes to the bottom too,
To the bottom.
but I don't plant my own, I buy them.
Yeah,
So-
yeah.
Well, I see our hour's up. I want to thank you kindly, Byron, for
Oh, you're
an
welcome.
informative week of information. So thanks, I will.
2 weeks, and I can't remember what our topic is in 2 weeks.
I can't remember either. It'll be a good one, though.
Oh, we try. We jump all over the place. It's just a lot of fun doing this. So